Welcome to the 19th common session of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics 2016. Today, we have two guests talking about quotations and text reuse, and the guests are Chronopoulos from the University of Freiburg and myself from the University of Leipzig. So the idea today is to talk about first, Stylianos will talk about citation ontologies, and then I will deal with a specific topic within quotations and tools, which is using index data from the Deipnos office of Athenaeus of Naucratis. But I think we can start, and of course, as usual, you have a link to the YouTube channel and also a link to our class outline in GitHub. I think that Stylianos can start. Hi, Stylianos. Welcome.
Hello, Monica. Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here again and to present again. I will now share my screen for the presentation. Yes. Monica, is it okay?
Yes, it works. I can see the slides.
You see the screen?
Yes, it works.
The title for our conversation is Annotating Quotations and Text Reuses. There are also other names with which we can describe this act of quoting or of reusing a text in another text. For example, the act of the word citation or citing. And this is actually what I'm going to use because the ontologies that I will present to you are using mainly this terminology. There are some interesting ontological differentiations and some fine philosophical problems behind the terminology difference, but we will not tackle them now. We will stay on the surface and cope with the notions as if they were synonymous. What I will do in the next 25 minutes is to present two different ontologies for annotating quotations that come from two different projects and explain the purpose and the features of each of these two ontologies, and then try also to use them in a tiny example from a text on which I'm working in order to see a little bit how it works. But let me first present the problem. Why do we want to use ontologies to describe citations and citing acts? Now, the main reason is that we try to describe in a formal, that means that everybody is not allowed to use his or her own terminology, and there is a normed and formalized vocabulary to do that, and a machine-readable way in order to describe citing acts of all types. Now, let me explain what a citing act is, or if you want, a quoting act. A text A refers in a certain way to text B and for a certain purpose. Now, as you notice from this very empirical definition, we have two main tasks. First of all, to identify exactly or as exactly as possible text A and text B. And the second task is to describe the way of the citing act and its purpose. Let me give you two examples to start with, and then see what the typographical tradition does out of that problem. It is from a lexicon of the 2nd century AD. The author the Latin name of the author is Pollux. He's writing in Greek. It's a Greek lexicon. And the title of the lexicon is Onomastiko. Now, the special features of the lexicon are not very important for the time being. I will read the small entry, and I will also provide you with some implied information in order to understand fully the text. Now, the text reads, God and gods and daimons. That means actually the semantic field is God, and the words we use to describe God are gods and daimons. And then comes a small remark about the word daimons, because it seems good to Homer to call the gods like that daimons. You notice that the editor, Erich Bette, has applied some information in parentheses. I come back to that point in a moment. The second example from the same lexicon, Aristophanes, it's about problems that a person have in his eyes. Aristophanes calls the eye ulcers sika. Then the editor provides also some information where we can find this citation. And Simonides, the iambic poet, calls a dim-sighted person sknipos. Again, the information. And then, in a separate line, comes the text of Simonides himself, or a blind one, or a dim-sighted, or someone who sees very well, reads the text that Pollux cites. Actually, in editions of Simonides, you find, instead of someone who sees very well at the end, the reading someone who can barely see. For us, it seems to make more sense in that context. Now, these two examples, I will make now an abstraction about how the typographical culture copes with the problem of annotating quotations. First of all, we use quotation marks and or we print verses with indentation, as you see in the second example. Secondly, we provide additional information in the text, the reference, the cited passage, as you see for Homer or for Aristophanes and for Simonides. And the third thing is what about Monica will later talk. We use indices at the end of the printed book, indices where all quoted passages are put together in a kind of alphabetical order of some sort or another to allow a non-linear access to this material. Now, some of the aims in digital editions is actually to make clear choices about what the cited text is, so to define its boundaries, something that in print edition, in a print edition, is done through quotation marks or through special printing devices. The second aim is to make a full list of cited passages accessible. So I go back to the example, the first example. You see in the parentheses, Bette put this SEP, which is a Latin abbreviation for often. So Bette gives us only one instance where Homer uses that word in that sense, and then he says, and in several other passages that he cannot and he does not want to cite in the print edition. But in a digital edition, we can have all these passages and make them accessible. The third aim is to describe in a formalized language the type of citation and to describe in a formalized language the purpose of the citing act. Using ontologies is part of the answer, how we can do that. And what I'm going to present to you is actually two different ontologies, the shared ancient wisdoms ontology, actually part of that ontology, and the citation typing ontology, also a part of it, in order to see how they cope with that problem. Let's start with the third ancient wisdoms ontology. An interesting thing when dealing with ontologies is to understand why they have been developed. Because if you don't understand that, then we don't understand why some choices have been made, why relationships are created as they are created, and why items are defined as they are. Now, the third ancient wisdoms ontology is, and I quote now from the web page, I can put also, or Monica, could you put the web page in the Google Hangout?
Yes.
I quote now, the shared ancient wisdoms ontology is our vocabulary for describing the types of relationships presented between or within our texts, and our means here of the project Sharing Ancient Wisdoms. The focus of the Sharing Ancient Wisdoms project is on collections of ideas and opinions ranging from pithy sayings to short passages from longer philosophical texts, which make up the ancient genre of wisdom literature. Wisdom literature can be called also in different names. Phenomenological literature could be one of them. Actually, in the Sharing Ancient Wisdoms project, we have record and visualization of the links within and between phenomenologia, between collections and source texts, between collections and their recipient texts. Now we know why the ontology have been developed for, and the ontology actually has two major parts. The first part is to define objects, and then to define properties for these objects, and under properties we have also to understand relationships between objects. The third ancient wisdoms ontology uses a very sophisticated hierarchy of objects to describe structural elements of a text. And now I say only text, but actually the project has a really very sophisticated ontology in order to describe not only the text as an abstract entity, but also the text as a material entity. I will not present this part of the ontology, although, as I want to repeat, that is really very sophisticated and very, very interesting. I only want to point to one object, the so-called content item. And the definition of content item is a basic unit of interest within the material. The material is the object that is superior in the hierarchy to content item, a division of a collection, instance, or section for more exact reference than when using a section. This identifies basic units of interest in the material of shared ancient wisdoms, Martin Tijaya segment. Now, what is here important that I have put that in bold is basic units of interest, and that means actually portions of, let's say, the text or strings of text that we want to mark in order to bring them, to put them in relationship to other strings of texts. Now, that means actually that we are now the interpreters, we are in front of our text, we define our interests, we define the object that we want to put into relationship to each other. Content item is actually linguistic. It belongs to the broader category linguistic object. It is a string of, it is a text string. Now, let's go to the main part of my presentation, the detailed vocabulary to describe citations, to describe these citing act actually. And I have used here a categorization that is not, I repeat, that is not present in the shared ancient wisdoms description, but it seems to me to be a logical categorization in order to see how the properties that are here presented, or the relationships that are here created and presented, make some sense. First of all, the relationship is categorized according to the degrees of exactness, how exact is the citation, and if the linguistic object A and B are of the same type, and same type means actually prose text to prose text, poetry to poetry, and so on, then we have 3 degrees of exactness: the verbatim degree, the variant degree, which is not verbatim but also not very far away, and the version degree, which may be a shorter version or a longer version. If now the linguistic object, and this is a decision that we take, A is different in type from the linguistic object B, then 2 degrees of exactness, a close rendering of, let's say that a prose author paraphrases a poem, actually trying to be as close to the content of the poem as possible, but puts that in prose, so it may be a close rendering of it, or he takes more freedom and it is only a very loose rendering of that poem. It is clear that there is no, how to put that, there is no mathematical way to define how close must be a rendering in order to be close, or how loose has to be a rendering in order to be loose. This is just, that depends of our material, that depends of what we are dealing with. The second major category is that according to language or encoding system. If we change the language, then we have translations that can also be close or not very close, and we have also the transliteration. And the third categorization criterion is really very interesting, and it is according to the chronological order and type of dependency. And in that category, we have the direct translation. So text A is a direct translation of text B, and that means that text B is prior to text A, and we know that text A used text B in order to create this translation, and the same thing as a direct copy. Direct translation and direct copy allow also for relationships from the other 2 categories, of course. Now, this is about this. It's very small. I have to stress that this is a small portion of the shared ancient wisdom ontology. It is a portion that focuses on describing citation. Shared ancient wisdoms ontology has much more to offer, and I can only recommend to have a look into that wonderful project, because at least I have learned very much, and I hope I will continue learning from that project. Now, the second ontology is the citation typic ontology. It's an ontology written in Web Ontology Language Description Logic 2 to enable characterization of the nature or type of citations. And you see here phrasing that will become, in a moment, more relevant, both factually and rhetorically. Factually means what the interpreter can see that's going on. Rhetorical means what the text states about the type or the nature of the citation it is doing, and to permit these descriptions to be published on the web. And you have also the web link to that. Now this version is of 2000. 15. Citations are categorized in different types: direct and explicit, indirect citations, and implicit citations, which include also phenomena like plagiarism or a kind of parody. Now, in the CITO ontology, the terminology Citation Act is used very often, and it is the major terminology with which CITO ontology operates. It is important to keep in mind that the scope of the CITO ontology is actually scholarly and scientific production and journalistic texts and literature, but they don't start from a specific genre of text as the third ancient wisdoms ontology does, but they start from a very broad, from different genres of modern text, and try to be as general as possible into encoding the Citation Act. The basic structure is fairly simple. Text A cites text B in a certain way, and I have put you, I give you here the formal presentation. First of all, we have to declare that it is a Citation Act in the CITO namespace, and then we define the citing entity, which is in our case paper B. The last line defines the cited entity, which is in our case paper B, and the middle line defines the type of relationship. In our case, the extents is the term that defines or describes the relationship. Now, actually in the CITO ontology, we have one big object property, the property cites, which is actually a way to say refers to, subproperty of refers to. And the main part of the CITO ontology consists in subproperties of cites. There are two logically different questions, and I again here have a categorization that is not part of the CITO ontology, but it seems to me logical to present it like that. But I repeat it is not part of this categorization, is not part of the CITO ontology. Now, two logical different questions. The first one, as what does the citing entity cite the cited entity? And here we have object properties starting with cites as. The second logical category is in what kind of activity has the citing entity been engaged while citing the cited entity. And I want to remind you that in the formal definition we have of the nature or type of citations. And actually these two categories, nature and type, point to these, in my opinion at least, to these two different logical questions that the subclasses of object property class cites covers. Now, subclasses of, under cites as, we find things like cites as an authority. That means that text A cites text B as an authority for what text A says, or as a data source, or as an evidence. And other similar, logical similar categories follow. You have them on the here in the presentation. The best way is to go to the ontology and read the formal description of that. The other big category is description of what I could call scholarly activities. Again, we speak of subclasses of cites, but here we try to describe ways in which the citing entity is engaged with the cited entity. And we find things like compiles, confirms, corrects, gives credits to, critiques, a very interesting category, derides, but also more neutral things like describes, disagrees with, gives background to, etc. I repeat, it's very interesting to go there, find the whole ontology, you see all the ontology and the formal descriptions. It's actually very intuitive to use. Of course, if you try to apply it really to examples that you have, there are always gray zones and places where you have to take some decisions. But if you document them, it is fine, I suppose. Now, I would propose that we go back now to the first example and try to see what we get if we try to put the citation act into the third ancient wisdoms ontology and into the cite ontology. I repeat the text: God and gods and daimons. So God is the overall description of the semantic field. Gods and daimons are the words that are used mainly to describe this semantic field. And then the remark, because it seems good to Homer to call the gods like that, namely daimons. In the third ancient wisdoms ontology, we define as text A the words daimons in Pollux text. We define as text B all instances in Homer where the word appears in the meaning gods. And we make the statement that the relationship is that text A is actually a variant of text B. Why not verbatim? Because actually, in the Homeric text, the actual wording may be very different in different casus, or in plural, or perhaps sometimes in singular. The word that is cited in Pollux text is not a verbatim rendering of one instance in the Homeric text. It is it is created as a more generic quotation in order to cover all instances, and that's why I would propose to use the relationship is variant of. In the cite ontology, the citing text and the cited text are clear. The interesting thing is that in describing the relationship, we can say that Pollux cites the Homeric text as an authority here in order to prove or to argue for a statement. And this is information that we interpret into our text. And of course, we gain a lot if at the end we can look into our, we can search into our Pollux onomasticon for cases where he cites other works as authorities, and then we get a result that is really, really extremely valuable. Let's go to the second example now, which is more difficult. Aristophanes calls the I alkers sika, and Simonides, the iambic poet, calls a dim-sided person sknipos. And then the verse of Simonides follows. I remind you that the text that Pollux cites is different than the text at the end, who sees very well, is different than the text that we find in the editions that we use normally, where we read who barely sees, or who cannot see. Now the relationship here, the final quotation, can be that text A is a variant of text B. If text B is the fragment of Simonides in an edition, in the edition of the fragments of Simonides. This is one possibility if we want to stress the point that here the text that Pollux cites is different than the text of the edition as we have it. In my opinion, to encode that as verbatim and point to a text of Simonides will not be correct. On the other hand, of course, and this is the problem here, Pollux cites Simonides in order to give us a verbatim quotation of Simonides, and he doesn't. In the cite ontology now, we can use the relationship cites as evidence in order to say, in order to declare that Pollux could have only said Simonides, the iambic poet, calls a dim-sided person sknipos, full stop. He doesn't. He cites the whole verse as an evidence for the fact that he just claimed that Simonides calls a dimmed person like that. And what about the citation sknipos itself? This is not a very easy question. Why does Pollux, or what is the relationship between the text of Pollux and the text of Simonides in that case? In the cite ontology, I would go for an annotation like informs, but I am not sure at all, and that could be actually an interesting point for a discussion, if not in that framework, because it's not very easy if you hear for the first time about that. Well, you don't, but okay. But actually, for me, it is still an open question. And with that, Monica, I am at the end of my part.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a question in the chat. Anisa is asking. I think this is an interesting question. I don't know if Stelios, if
now I will go to the Hangout.
Ah, yes. So you can see now the chat, of course.
Some of them, yes, Anisa. Some of them can be combined, but as far as I understand, there are also mutually exclusive activities.
But I can say one thing, because here, so we can use the ontology. So one editor annotates the text reuse. We have your example, Stelios, and you decide, as an editor, you have the responsibility, so you choose this ontologist term. But, and this is something that I am doing with the CTS and site architecture, so another editor can annotate the same text, putting different ontology terms. So they are mutually exclusive, but if we have the whole structure, so with the CTS architecture, we can put precise references to the text. In this case, we have Pollux referring to Homer in general, or Pollux referring to Simonides. Well, we can define both texts. In the first case, it's difficult because basically Pollux is referring to Homer, to many different passages of Homer, but still we can look for them. And this is interesting because in a printed culture we can be ambiguous, or at least we can say, okay, look, we can cite just one verse of Homer and then many other passages, and it's the responsibility of the reader to look for these passages. In the case of the quotation of Simonides, we can have two different URNs for Pollux and for Simonides. And two editors, of course, can annotate them in a different way, putting different ontology terms. So we can, I think we can express the disagreement or different opinions, not necessarily the disagreement. So of course, one editor has to choose the ontology class, but another editor can choose another class for the same passage. So this is something we can do, and this is something very important for our work, to express different opinions, different interpretation of the text reuse.
What I didn't say, Monica, at all is what you are bringing to the discussion. Of course, there is this whole big issue that I put at the very beginning. How do we point to the text? Of course. Yeah. How do we define our object? And of course, the usage of CTS technology and architecture here is the way to go. And Sarah Dench and Wisdom's use the CTS architecture for that, and it seems that it works very, very clear.
Yeah, exactly, it works. This is today I can't use persits in the sense that we are still implementing persits for annotating quotations and text reuses, and I'm developing the CTS site architecture. So maybe in another common session we can talk about that. But this is the combination. So with the CTS architecture we can point to the text, both in the citing text and in the cited text, when we have both. Otherwise, we have just one citable evidence. If we don't have the quoted text, I don't know, when Athenaeus quotes Hellanicus, we don't have the original text, but we can still do that. And then, of course, we can use these classes from, for example, sharing ancient wisdoms. Of course, this is my personal opinion. I think we can use these classes, but the only thing is that maybe we don't have to be so precise in terms of ontology classes, because but this is my personal opinion, so I am a bit worried to use these labels, precise labels. Maybe this is something that we can put in the commentary, because when we annotate a quotation or a text reuse, of course we can say this is a close rendering of, etc. But we can also add a commentary where the editor says something more about that, because what worries me is to put these labels to our text reuse, saying this is a verbatim quotation, this is a close rendering of, this is a far rendering of, etc. So, but this is my personal opinion. I still need to use them. So I don't want too many labels, too many. I don't know if you agree, but
for me, it is a very interesting and open question that has to be dealt also with taking into account the genre of the text, the quotation practices of the text, how clean are they, and also how we define. We saw these three categories: verbatim, variant, and loose. So if we find a way to define them in a very clear way, and so that everybody knows what's the difference between variant and loose, for example, when does a variant stop to be a variant and starts to be loose, and of course there are gray zones there, then we could gain something. But using more, to use a metaphor, more flat ontologies, not very deep ontologies, can be the way to go if we want to not to overload our edition or our scholarly project with too much interpretation.
I get it.
Can I just add one thing to that? I mean, on the one hand, my instinct is usually to go with much flatter ontologies, as you're saying, so go into much less detail, because it makes things much more compatible, much easier to do large-scale searches across it. But on the other hand, if we want to be more specific and more exact, I think what we still need, in addition to ontologies like CITO and SORS, is we really need an ontology that gives us the full bibliographical apparatus that you need when making scholarly statements. So who is making the statement, when, where do they argue this, what evidence do they base it on, what conditionality is there behind this? You know, I can say this is an exact translation of only in the following circumstances, contexts. And that sort of ontology doesn't exist. I mean, primarily because it's really, really hard to imagine how we would define that. But I've recently heard of 3 different projects, one of which is Snap, who want to come up with such an ontology, and I think that's you know, that's one of the things you guys are talking about as well. One of the things you guys are missing in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And for example, in Perseus, given that we don't have this ontology yet, so we have been experimenting with using the open annotation core data model for adding these things like the responsibility of the editors. We can put this thing. Monica Berti is annotating this in this way, classifying it. Stylianos Chronopoulos in that way. So this is an experiment, not.
Yeah. Some of the things that you can say, like who is annotating it and when and things like that exist, but really to be able to say, you know, this statement is only true if this statement over here isn't. This statement uses the following bibliographical citation. This statement was true in 2014, but may not be true at any other time, and things like that. It's, you know, the degree of the number of possible things we might want to say is almost endless. I'm glad I don't have to invent that ontology.
Yes, it's true, and this is the reason why we are using other possibilities. But definitely, this is what we need. So thank you, Gabby, for that. So well, I think so. If yes, and then Anise says so. ND architectures can talk with each other in technological terms. Well, hopefully.
But this is a statement, I suppose, Anise, isn't it?
Yes. I hope so. Well, we have the chat, so we can go on with the conversation. In the meantime, so I think I can go on, and let me try to, no, wait, I have to share the screen. Okay, present. Can you see my slides?
Yes, Monica, everything is fine.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going on. So I'm not talking about the CTS site architecture because we don't have enough time. We have already talked about that in previous common sessions. Anyway, I will refer to that. But Stylianos has given us an idea of the issues we have to deal with when working with quotations and text reuses in a digital environment. Now, going on, so of course, when working with quotations and text reuses, well, we are interested in getting data, and by data I mean, well, we have different pieces of information when working with the quotations and text reuses. Of course, my perspective is connected to the work on fragmentary authors and works, especially quotations and text reuses of lost works. With Stylianos, we have seen 2 examples of text reuse of still surviving author, but we have other examples. And this data, well, we have not only the text reuse, the quotation, the allusion, the paraphrase, but we have other elements such as the name of the reused author, or the title or the description of the reused work, etc. And then many other elements like verba dicendi, introducing the actual text reuse, and so on. So how do we get this data? Well, we have different possibilities. First of all, we can produce manual annotations of text reuse information. This is something that now we can do, and for example, we have seen the ontology, so we can annotate manually the text reuse, pointing precisely to the portion of text we are interested in, and then maybe adding ontology classes. Then we can also use name entities recognition. We can look for author names, work titles, and descriptions in our text. Actually, the name of the reused author, of the cited authors, and then we also have many examples of references to work or work descriptions of reused, cited works, etc. And then the goal of this work is also to generate authority lists. By authority lists, I mean lists of cited authors and cited works, especially for lost authors. And for example, for Greek literature, we have to remember that about 60% of Greek literature is lost, and these authors are preserved only through quotations and text reuses in later text. So that's why we want to have this sort of authority list where we have really a catalog of fragmentary authors who are now lost, with variants, because sometimes the names are cited in a different way, and also of works. And then we have other concepts pertaining to text reuse. And to generate this authority list, we have different possibilities, but we can also use, of course, print editions data. What do I mean by that? So by that, I mean to produce, to access in digital format the content of critical editions, where we have many pieces of information about reused authors and works. And this is something that I have been doing, I have been experimenting with, producing machine actionable versions of paper indices, as Stylianos mentioned at the beginning of this common session. So, well, here we have an example. This is, we have 2 pages of the index of the last Loeb edition of the Deipnosophists of Athenaeus of Naucratis, edited by Douglas Olson. And so I'm referring specifically to the work of Athenaeus because I'm doing this work for Athenaeus, but of course this is a work that we can apply to other sources. So here we have 2 pages, we have a list of entries, and for each entry, after the comma, we have a description. At the beginning, we have a Brothenon, a mother of Themistocles, so a sort of identifier for each entry. Then we have authors, etc. And then after the comma, in parentheses, in the first line, we have also the reference to a prosopographical collection. And then after the comma, we have a precise reference to the passage in the Deipnosophists of Athenaeus, where we have the quotation or the citation or the allusion to this person or this author. In the first line we don't have an author, but we have the name of the mother of Themistocles. And this index is an index of authors, texts, and persons, so not only authors, but also persons. Now, here we have another example. This is the second edition, the second Teubner edition of the Deipnosophists by Georg Keibel. Here we have the index scriptorum, so we have a specific index for the authors cited by Athenaeus in the Deipnosophists. This index is a bit different in the sense that we have here we have for each entry at the beginning we have the name of the reused author in Latin in capital letter, and then we have also after that the title in Greek, the title of the work of these reused authors. And after that, as you can see in the first line, Acesias, then, well, in parentheses, we have a variant, and then Obsertutica, so the title of the work, and then we have the reference to, a precise reference to the passage of the Deipnosophists where this author and his work is cited by Athenaeus. And in this case, and this is important to remember that these differences are important if we want to convert these printed indexes in a digital format. For example, here we have the book number expressed with Roman numerals, while in the previous index also we have the book number in Arabic numeral, and so on. Now, before that, so if we want to produce a machine-readable version of these indices, there is some work that we have to do. Well, first we can focus on an entry. This is again the index by Olson. In the first line we can see an entry about Alexis of Samo, historian. So we have a description of this author, a sort of label, historian. Then after that we have FGRH, so a reference to the Fragmente der griechischen Historiker, which is a collection where the fragments of Alexis are collected. Then the number in this collection, F1, fragment 1. And after the column we have the reference to the passage of the De Hypnosophist where this author is quoted, and this passage is fragment 1. And then the second one, after fragment 2, we have another reference. So we have in the first case 13, which is the book of Athenaeus, and then we have this number 572F, which refers to a specific passage, and we will see what this means. And the same for the second reference, which is from book 12 of the De Hypnosophists. Now, well, let's focus on the second one. So this kind of reference depends on the work of the first, we can say, well, not the first editor, but depends on the edition, one of the first editions of the De Hypnosophists produced by Casaubon in the 16th century. And, okay, here we have the page of the edition by Casaubon. As you can see, well, the number 12 refers to the book of Athenaeus. Then we have this number 540. So 540 is the page in the edition by Casaubon. So this number refers to the page, as we can see in the edition of Casaubon. So it's and of course this depends on the arrangement of the contents of the De Hypnosophists in this book, in this format. And then we have these letters D, E. So we have a section from D to E. In the slides you can see, so these letters that are printed on the right of the Greek text, from D to E. So it refers to a division of the page of Casaubon into different sections corresponding to about 10 lines of text. So this is a reference that is not connected to the content of the De Hypnosophists, but to the layout of the page of the edition by Casaubon. And you can see this edition online is available. So this kind of reference corresponds to another one devised by another editor, Keibel, who is the second editor of the De Hypnosophists for the Teubner editor. Here you can see we have the same text, but the content, the text of the De Hypnosophists is arranged in a different way. And in fact, this section 440 DE in Casaubon corresponds to chapter 57 in Keibel. As you can see, Keibel puts on the right side of the Greek text also the Casaubon letter. So in the Keibel edition we have both reference systems. And at the beginning of each chapter in Keibel we have a number. Now the system devised by Keibel is different in the sense that, well, we still have the division of the work in 15 books, sorry, and then we have a division of the content, a division of the text, an arrangement of the text according to the contents of the De Hypnosophists. So it's a different system. Now, here I'm referring to the CTS architecture. So if we want to precisely point to the text of the De Hypnosophists, we prefer to use Kybel citation, so the second system, where we have the book number and the paragraph or the chapter, because this system is canonically independent of any particular manifestation of the text. Well, what do I mean by that? Yes, because most important of all, in the system devised by Kybel, we have a precise chunk of text. Because if I go back to this slide, as you can see on the left, where we have Casaubon, well, these letters, these small letters D, we have in the page A, B, C, D, E, well, many times are printed between two lines, so we don't know precisely where a section ends and the following one begins. And in fact, every editor after Casaubon has the problem to see exactly where Casaubon sections starts and ends. While the system devised by Kybel is precise, because we have a number at the beginning of a new paragraph, so we know exactly with which word a new paragraph starts and ends. So that's why in a digital environment we prefer to use a system like the one devised by Kybel. And here we have, in this slide, a CTS URN representing this passage according to the CTS architecture. So we have this in the syntax, where we have Greek letter, TLG, we have two numbers referring to Athenaeus and then to the late Nosophist, well, a specific edition. After that, we have the reference, the precise reference to the book and to the paragraph in Kybel. So here we have a precise chunk of text. We know where it begins and where it ends. Now, the first thing that we have to do when working with indexes is to try to use a system like the one by Kybel, but we have a problem. For example, in the case of the late Nosophists, also Kybel, even if he has decided to arrange the text in a different way from Casaubon, in the indices still use the method devised by Casaubon. And so we need to convert his index into another system. So let me see if I can, okay, I can open the reference converter, and give me 1 second because I would like to show you the page. Give me 1 second. Okay, if I go here, I can show you. Okay, no, it's not here. Sorry, I'm looking for the right link. Okay, Kybel, just to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, here we can see in Internet Archive we have the first page of the index by Kybel. So Kybel, even if he arranges the text in book and paragraphs, in his index he still uses the Casaubon reference system, as you can see here, where we have this Roman numeral 12, the book number, and then we have 516C. So we have to convert these references into Kybel ones in order to produce precise CTS URNs that allow us to point to the text. This is something that I have been doing, producing a converter. So we have an online converter, as you can see here. For example, I can put a Casaubon reference 373A, submit, and I get a result. I will have on the left, well, the precise, the book where 373A of Casaubon is, and then the correspondence to the paragraphs or chapter in Kybel. And then I have also links to the PDF of both editions in Internet Archive. Of course, Kybel paragraphs are longer than Casaubon section, so that's why here you can see 3 pages, and then we have to look for the exact page where we have the correspondence. Now, this is the first work before producing a digital version of this index. Well, now we can go back to the index by Kybel. Here you can see the first two pages. Now, in order to have a digital version, we have to digitize the text, and this is something that we have done, and we have produced an OCR output. And this is what we have at the beginning. So we have, this is the OCR output of this first page of the index by Kybel. And you can see that we have also P tags corresponding to the entries as they appear in the paper edition of Kybel. As you can see, so we have P for each line basically, but we have only P, so we can't distinguish the content within a P. So here we have the name of the reused author, everything together, then the title, then a reference to Athenaeus, and so on. For example, for Archeus Erythraensis, we have then a list of works, of his works, but each under P. So we have to find a way to structure this text in order so that the machine can recognize the different parts. And then, of course, we still have mistakes. We can find mistakes, as you can see here. 11 actually is the Roman numeral for 2, because this is the second index published by Kybel in his edition. The first one is the Dialoghi Personae, and then we have here, for example, a K instead of an R. Anyway, so there is, in order to work on this OCR output, we have to combine manual and automatic work. So in order to get something like this, where we can start first of all to distinguish the different authors, especially where we have authors in the index with many works. Then progressively we can produce something like this, which is this is a screenshot of a CSV file where you begin to see something. So in each so we have in each line we have the name of the author and then all the works, but still there is some work to do. And here we have been combining scripts and manual work, so it's a constant combination of this kind of work. And then progressively we can arrive to a final file where we have for each line, each line corresponds to each entry in the index by Kybel. So here there is a lot of work, and here the important thing is to combine in the right way manual and automatic work, because we can't do everything manually or automatically. And this is, well, different results. And here we have, I think, yes, this is the final file, and you can find it in GitHub, where we have the list of authors from the index by Kybel. Now here I can show you the online version of these indexes. So, well, here I have worked not only on the index by Kybel, but also on the index by Meinecke, which is the first Teubner editor. And in the edition by Meinecke, we have only the index scriptorum, and for and here you have the link. Here you can see well, the page in Internet Archive, so you can compare. You still have the PDF of the index by Meinecke, and this is the first one. Then we have two indexes by Kybel, the index scriptorum here and the Dialoghi Personae, because Kybel publishes, well, the index of the authors reused by Athenaeus, but also a list of the sophists talking and quoting other authors that are described in the Deipnos office. And here you can see we have the link. So here you can see the Dialoghi Personae, where we have the list of the sophists, the so-called sophists that take part in the banquet described by Athenaeus. And then I have also worked on the index by Olson. This is a different index because we have not only authors and texts, but also persons in general cited by Athenaeus in the Deipnos office. And this is the last Loeb edition, but I am also working on the edition by Gulick, which is the first Loeb edition of the Deipnos office. And then for each index, we have a digger for performing queries in the database of the index, a dynamic graph for a graphic visualization, and an API. So we can see, for example, we can go back to Kybel. So in the digger, you can perform queries in the index, and then here I have a description of the fields that we have in the database that correspond to the entries in the Kybel index. Of course, here is interesting because so I'm using Kybel data, but in some way to produce the database, I have to interpret these data. And then, for example, for the first example, here we have Aeschylus. So here we have a list of all the passages of Aeschylus cited by Athenaeus in his work. So you can see in this interface, you can see, for example, in the first line, Aeschylus Agamemnon, and the precise verse of Agamemnon cited in book 15. And here we have the passage according to the Casaubon reference. It's corresponding according to Kybel. Then we have 3 different links at the end. So we have a link to the Greek text of the Deipnos office in Perseus, so that people can read the text where we have the quotation of this passage of this verse of Aeschylus. We have a second link to the front end developed here at the University of Leipzig. And finally, we have a link to Persis, which is our annotation platform, where you can go directly to the text. Oh yes, now I'm sorry, I'm using the Leipzig. I can't show you Persis because I'm not using my personal account because I'm hosting the Hangout. Anyway, through these links, you can, and everyone can do that. You just need a Google account, and you can go within Persis to this precise passage, and you can start annotating, because you can read the actual reuse of Aeschylus. So you can read the verse of Aeschylus in the Deipnos office, and you can annotate it. And we have a few classes of the Source ontology that Stelios mentioned at the beginning. And then we have, well, a list of course, of other verses of Aeschylus quoted in the Deipnos office. Sometimes, as you can see in the second entry, I hope you can read because I understand that the screen is small. In the second one, as you can see, in the second one, yes, so we have this verse which is mentioned in book 13 in 573b section of Casaubon. Now, in this case, this portion of text, 573b, actually is between 2 paragraphs of Kybel, 31 and 32. So I have produced this automatic converter. So this is the result of the automatic conversion. Here we need a manual work, because we have to go to the text of the Deipnos office and see exactly where is the quotation of the verse of Aeschylus, if in paragraph 31 or paragraph 32 of Kybel. So that's why here we have a vote, because a reader can read the text of the Deipnos office and vote, is paragraph 31 or 32 or both. It happens because there is not a precise correspondence between Casaubon and Keibel. Then going back, so this is the so-called digger, and so you have each entry of the index by Keibel. Then we have a dynamic graph. We can perform different queries for, and then I can show you an example. For example, here we can see Homeric works you can visualize where they are quoted in the text of the Deipnosophists. And then you have also an API. And we have these three tools for each index, for Meinecke, for Keibel, and for Olson. And here we also have a book stream. By book stream, well, I mean this is an alignment of index entries. So here we can see, so this is an alignment by book and paragraphs of the Deipnosophy. So in this case, at the beginning we have book 1 in black, chapter or paragraph 1 of the Deipnosophies. So this is the Keibel system. And then we can align the entries of the indices. So first of all, we have Olson, then Meinecke, and the two indices by Keibel. Of course, the index by Olson is rich because he includes not only authors and texts, but also persons. And here we can see what we have in the indices, maybe correct them, and then we can, of course, jump to the index if we click on each entry, and we can see what we have. Okay,
if you want me to show the Perseids link, I can do that.
Ah, okay, yes, sure. So because okay, let me go back.
So I can share my screen.
Yes, I'm going back because I have many windows. Oh, okay, I think I can go back to the, okay, stop presenting because I'm hosting the Hangout and
exactly.
Yes, it's true, with a different browser. Yes, it's true. Anyway, so Stylianos, yes, if you want, you can. Yeah,
I can do that.
Yes. Anyway, so while you share your screen, I can just add, so why working with this paper indices? Well, this is an experiment, but this is important because we have a lot of data in these indices, and this is the first rich list of references to reused authors and works. We can use these indices to go to the text and to start annotating the reuses. Of course, then the idea is to enrich these indices. First of all, sometimes correcting, because we can find human errors in these indices, or we can enrich them with new entries, etc. And for example, in all these indices we have, well, in the index by Olson, we have a list of names in English, including also the ethnicon. In the indices by Keibel and Meinecke, we have Latin names, not Greek. So we want to convert the Latin names into Greek, and then automatically find these names in the text. So we have, again, to combine manual and automatic work. But this is a first work to get data about quotations and text reuses. So I don't know, Stylianos, if you, oh yes, okay, so you can, so I see the, Stylianos? Oops, I think.
So do you see the screen?
No, yes, I see the screen. Yes, I see the screen.
So you guide me, you say, and I do.
Yes, you can, okay, click on, click there, yes, you can click.
So actually,
okay, you can click on, so here we see the precise CTS URN within Perseids referring to this precise passage of the Deipnosophists, which is book 10 and paragraph 6. And then if you click...
Can you project Stylianos to everyone?
Ah, sorry, I apologize for that. So, okay. I hope, but Stelios is presenting. Can you see his screen?
Yes, now.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so when you, in the index, when you click on in the last column where you have this link, you, okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, you click there, and here we have a link to the passage within Perseids. Okay, so here we have the CTS URN referring precisely to this edition of the Deipnosophists, which is the Kybel edition in Perseus, and then we have 10.6, which is the precise Kybel paragraph, so book 10, paragraph or chapter 6. And then if you click on edit on, okay, here we have, so is loading. Okay, and here we have the whole chapter 6 of book 10, and here we can manually annotate the line or the words that correspond to the actual reuse. So in the index we have, as we said, we saw at the beginning, Aeschylus, Agamemnon, and then the verse. And then here we can check the text, we can look for the text, and we can highlight the line or the words and annotate. Now we don't have time. Yes, Stelios is showing that, so we can point to a word, and as you can see above the Greek text, we produce a URI where we have the precise CTS URN referring to this passage with a substring with the word or the words that you are annotating. And then below there is a drop-down menu. Okay, here we have this. Here we're still working on that. We have a few classes from the SOS ontology. You can, yes, something is attributed to author, but this is still a work in progress. So anyway, the idea here, we can use what Stelios has shown. So we can select an ontology class, and then on the right we can, if we have the reuse of a still surviving author, on the right we can look for this passage in the available textual sources. Or if the reused author is lost, we have to produce a new site URN where we annotate the work of the editor. For example, Stelios is annotating this word, and here we will produce a site URN, which is different from a CTS URN, and this site URN basically says, okay, Stelios is citing this word in the Greek text, and he classifies it as a text reuse of a certain author, and so on. So I can't show you more because this is still a work in progress, but this interface shows you how we can combine the CTS site architecture with the ontology. In this case, we have seen the SOS ontology, CETO. Of course, we still need to work a lot on these ontologies, as we said at the beginning. So that's it for me. I'm late, I'm sorry. Usually I interrupt speakers and guests in our common sessions. Now I have to stop. I don't know if you have questions, and thank you for your patience. There are questions, or? Stelios, you are muted.
I would like to make a small remark only.
Yes, yes, please.
Now, I find the work with indices really fascinating, and the most interesting thing, in my opinion, is that we realize how different scholars produce indices, because they are really not compatible with each other, not only in terms of what do they include and what they don't, but also in terms of what they choose not to include at all. I mean, although they have a list of quoted authors or quoted passages or persons, perhaps, they make decisions according to importance, in their opinion, that they are only implicit decisions. And some persons that are there as names, and a name entity research would find and annotate them, they don't appear at all. This is always, for me at least, it is a very interesting insight into seeing how different you work when you annotate ad hoc a text with name entities, for example, and if you consult only an index and try to go back and find the names and see if everything is there, and it is not.
Yeah, you're right, Stylianos. And in fact, in the last Love edition, we have a big index, authors, text, and persons, because there are
exactly
ancient people, we can't classify them as authors. For example, musicians is a problem. So that's why recent editors have decided to include also persons. And then, yes, it's interesting. So, but given that we have this huge heritage, because we have indices in every critical edition, I said, well, we should use them. Of course, there is still a lot of work that we have to do, but this is an example for starting to collect data about quotations and text reuse. Other? Okay, Anisa, you don't have questions. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, thank you very much. So if, and thank you, yes, Gabby, also for your questions before about the ontologies. This is a big work that we have to do. We are aware of that. And well, if there are no other questions, so it's 6:20, I think we can end our common session. Next week, we have a common session from the Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C. I will go there. I know they want me to report about the work that we have been doing together for Sunoikis Digital Classics. So I will talk about our work. I hope we will have the common session at 5 p.m. Leipzig time, but I will post information about that, because it will be during another common session of the original, I can say, Sunoikis. So anyway, I will post about that, and I hope we can see each other next Wednesday. So, well, thank you for today. Thank you all. Thank you, Stylianos, for your contribution, and see you next week. Bye and good night.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.